Hello, everyone. Thank you, GBBC, for hosting us today. And I'm really happy that we are adding up on these very important topics. What John just was saying, and I think it's extremely important that we move forward with this approach to find the real values into what we are building up and to find a real sustainable solutions that can move forward within the WEF crypto blockchain communities in order to make sure that anything that is built is actually built having in mind those values. So my name is Cristina Lucrezia Corner. I'm managing the editorial team at Cointelegraph. We are covering tech, fintech, future of money, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and AI. And I'm really very happy to be here with this amazing co-panelists to discuss the questions of inclusion, integrity, and data. Data is, in my opinion, the currency of the present, and it's sort of a way to measure any big impact that any technology is making. While inclusion and integrity are those words that are used a lot. And I'm really happy that we have it together with data today, because this is something that we can not only talk philosophically about, right, but also apply to the data aspect. So in order to introduce every one of you, I would love to ask you, how do you approach the inclusion and integrity within your respective organizations and roles? And what is the data solutions that you have been working with recently? And then we'll move forward. Let's start with the left side. And
hi, thank you so much, and to Sandra and the rest of the GBBC team. It's so great to be here with so many innovative people. My name is Stan Stolniker. I'm the founder of Hub Culture. We're one of the world's oldest online social networks. You could say probably the only independent online social network. You probably have seen some of the hubs around town. We have the Ice House across the street, the Tech Lodge, our chalet, and we've been in Davos since 2007. And with building out hubs here since 2009, we were the first people to start creating places on the promenade. But all of those places are really extensions of a virtual world. We put ourselves at the really forefront of the virtual state movement. We're a social network that was created in 2002. And in 2007, we created a digital currency called VEN, which powers our community and our kind of virtual nation state. In 2013, we moved deeply into digital identity, and today we run probably the deepest digital identity service on the planet called Hub ID. And then that is meshed with asset tokenization and increasingly with AI with our project called Zeek. So what's really unique about this from a data perspective is that we are the only sort of Web 2 company that I know of that provides individual data ownership to all of our members. And the decentralization of that data up until very recently has been largely impossible. I know because we spent 10 years trying to be able to do it, and until the technologies that decentralization and blockchains provide have made that possible. But we have built legal frameworks to enable our users to own their data, and we've also developed ways for that data to be shared and monetized using VEN in the interests of the end user. Because we are a social network that uses digital currency as our main mechanism, we're also the only social network that doesn't sell advertising. So we are not in conflict with the needs and interests of our users. And I think that is a fundamental differentiator, because it allows us to be aligned with the long-term interests of our citizens as we work to build a kind of sort of crypto state that's in between the individual and the nation state.
How many users do you currently have?
We have about 100,000 members, and we do about one VEN transaction a second, but only about 1 in every 100,000 VEN transactions is from a human.
Thank you very much. Nigina.
Oh, thank you very much for this panel and important issue, which I think is not spoken enough about inclusion and equity. and I'm Chief of Innovation at the United Nations Population Fund. And I run the Equalizer Fund, which is investing specifically in innovations by women, for women, and with women. And when we say with women, we mean include them in the design stage, in the data set. When you create something, don't assume that if it is gender neutral, it is actually gender neutral. Because once you make it this assumption, the man becomes the default, because it is actually easier to recruit men in the data set and find men in it to train the technology if we talk about AI. And we, of course, focus a lot on healthcare, women's health, and gender-based violence, for example. And we do know that a lot of those solutions, frontier tech, excluded, really biased. If we talk about AI, which WEF is everywhere AI, but we do know it's really biased. In healthcare, for example, solutions, it provides over 70% of either errors or lower quality outcomes for women, because women are not equitably part of the data set. And we launched the Equity 2030 Alliance just recently, a few months ago, to actually bring companies, entities who work, including on technology, to produce solutions and products and services with the woman in mind, include them in an equitable way. And one of the examples, when we actually ourselves learn how to not just include women, but include women from different backgrounds and communities, we launched the solution of cash assistance or digital cash assistance to the survivors of the gender-based violence in Ukraine. And the technology, tech looks great, and we're always so happy, and we did it with partners. And the first couple of months, we get reports, and only 5% of women opted for the digital wallets and digital coins. And we're like, what's happening? But luckily, we offered them also another option, is to have a traditional bank transfer. So we started to dig into that, and a traditional woman in a rural area, especially if she's not that young, like middle-aged, she doesn't really know about the digital world. She's scared. She needs explanation. She needs some assistance. She needs to understand how it makes actually transaction really fast, secure, protected. It addresses her, how it's easy to use. But she also needs to see that she can then transfer it if she wants to her bank or cash it. So we started to invest in communication, education, and really translate it into a very simple language. What does it mean? Because technology can be scary for some users who do not understand it. So now we have 50-50 more or less percent opting for traditional transfers and using digital wallets, which is a great increase. But again, even us, we think about all of them. But no, we need to learn. We need to really ask communities what they want. And the same, of course, in healthcare. We train midwives. We started in India using chatbots in different languages. And again, we train it on the communities there in India. It's not that we develop it somewhere in the West Coast in Silicon Valley and bring the solution and say, okay, use it, it's great. No, we actually make sure it addresses their needs and their questions. That gives us also the other side of analytics. If we see there are certain questions which are repeating, we know that this is where we take it offline. It train them in those specific areas. And of course, we work a lot on the sexual reproductive health and access to contraception. A lot of young women are afraid to go in person to some healthcare providers and ask the questions. They don't want to be judged, or they think they will be misunderstood. So creating those kind of AI assistants is really helping them in a very anonymous and friendly way to get what they need in a quality. But we use the controlled data set. So it's not that it goes and take information from anywhere in the web. What we feed into that system, we know it's a quality and controlled one. But again, addressing the inclusion, it's really important to have diverse teams of developers. And I'm a medical doctor, I'm not a tech developer, but I do know that if in that team there are only some part of the population and others are not included, they probably will not think about the needs of others. So it's important.
Well, I like how you pinned it. So bias is not only in our heads, but there is also data bias that is related to the fact that the data is not comprising all the parts. But I think we always have to, and the scope of this amazing initiatives actually demonstrate that we always have to be open and to to handle and to fight the internal biases, because we always have it. And even if we have a representative developers team, it doesn't mean that we actually have everybody represented. So very interesting. Thank you so much. Scott, last but not least.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm a recovering lawyer, and I was a technology and data lawyer. So this concept of data is something that's been something we've been thinking deeply about in the way we've built Toko. So I founded Toko. It's a real-world asset tokenization engine, now regulated out of the Middle East in Dubai. And a couple of things I want to pick up on around this theme. Firstly is around data. So I guess the motivation for me was around democratization of finance, which is really about inclusion. How do we get more people involved in finance? How do we get more people that own assets that are currently illiquid? How do we help them to release equity in or do fundraising for a wider range of projects? And on the other side of that investment equation, how do we get more people participating in and getting access to interesting high yield products that in many respects are and in TradFi are restricted either because of regulatory reasons or practical reasons. So how do we do that? There are two things I'd like to really pick up on. One is the data architecture we used. I started with Toko trying to partner with other tokenization platforms and was very disappointed with their ambition around data. They're spitting out coins with nothing in them. For me as a lawyer, I wanted to put the deal in the token. And by the deal, I mean everything. I want to put all salient information about if it's a piece of real estate, for example. I want to put lots of information about that piece of real estate into the token. I also want to put key documents, such as land title documents, investment documents, prospectuses, memorandums, whatever it might be that is in fact the deal. And by providing that sort of breakdown in the data asymmetry that exists in private markets today, the idea is more people will be able to see it, therefore participate, rather than the kind of closed shop, who knows who world of private finance today. And secondly, when it comes to secondary market, so the ability for people to either sell out of or people to then buy in at later stages, we now have a living and breathing data room, rather than going back to the lawyers X $100,000 to recreate a data room, which therefore it requires a certain size of deal and again just restricts the ability of people to come in at smaller bite sizes. So again, respecting that complexity of, if you're going to put all that information in a token, how do you do that while recognising the law has issues? Data privacy, confidentiality, lots of reasons why you wouldn't necessarily want all of that information on a public chain. So we use a hybrid architecture where an issuer can decide what information sits on a public chain versus that which sits in the private chain. And so that's really the sort of data architecture. The second piece around inclusion I want to give an example of a real project we did with the founder of a fantastic project. It's a replacement loan, as in replacement of a traditional home mortgage product. She was based in the US, a young female founder, very bright, basically unable to get finance though. She's as we know, founders, owners of businesses don't have wages, don't work for somebody, therefore banks don't like them. So actually the first project we did, her model was a two-sided platform where the homeowner could effectively give up some ownership of their home contractually, and on the investor side, you could have multiple people participating in tokenized interest in that property. A couple of things around that. Firstly, the banks didn't have a role in it. It was peer-to-peer financing. Secondly, the structure of that particular product meant that the investors got exposure not just to a component of sort of fixed interest like you would in a normal loan, but they also got exposure to the appreciation of the underlying home asset, which again made it Sharia law compliant. So we're looking at rolling that out in the Middle East, for example. And so in that particular model, using Toko, it was an SEC regulated first token under a self-issuance exemption. We got a young female founder the ability to buy into a home by having third parties financing in a fractional sense her moving into a house. So to me, that's the kind of inclusion and democratization that we were trying to do with Toko.
So we have different aspects here: architecture, education, transparency, community engagement, a lot of amazing initiatives that could be implemented to inclusive and integral data-driven solutions. Let me reverse it a little bit. So what is going wrong? Why, you are here representing amazing projects, but you have a few hundred of thousands of users and Facebook has
millions.
Billions.
What is it?
what is it wrong with the current DNA of us as users and us as builders, as a bigger community, that the inclusion and integrity, the concepts that everyone is talking about, are actually implemented to very little scope?
Well, I was in a talk last night at the Ice House, and there was a person talking about something called flash scaling. So ChatGPT went to 100 million users in 6 weeks. Threads this year went to 100 million users in 6 days. So the ability to scale to large numbers is not impossible, right? But there are obstacles to some of these things on the decentralized web.
Impossible is possible, as the
Exactly.
neighbor
So,
pavilion.
I think it's down to all of us. I mean, we've been operating for 20 years, and so, you could say, like, why don't we have millions and millions of users? And it's something I wake up and go to bed thinking about all the time. I think some of it is really just simple things. Like, we have a very deep platform. But I think one of the things that has come to me recently, because I was asking somebody this very question the other day, and they said that in reality, we really have room in our heads for about 5 to 7 platforms. And so if you really want to see something that big, it's going to have to displace one of these other 5 to 7 platforms. And so if you look at Threads versus Twitter, or now X, Threads started off fast, but how much do you really use Threads?
I mean, one person is using 5 to 7. Oh, interesting.
One person has the mental capacity to sort of deal with 5 to 7 platforms. And then you have like verticalized things that you go to occasionally. And so I think we've realized that we're okay with being one of those platforms that people go to occasionally. We've had 75,000 people through our doors, and most people come to Hub when they want to engage with us in the real world. And we're okay with that. But I think depending on the platform, whatever else it is, you got to keep in mind that a lot of the early Web 2 real estate has been taken up by these players, and it's really tough to dislodge. Look at how hard it is for Threads to dislodge Twitter. And that's about as good a concept as you're going to have. How is a Web 3 play going to dislodge Instagram or X? I think it's going to be way tougher than people think. But I do think there is a pathway, and I really think it's gaming. So we're really on the edge of gaming is everything. And you look at like Axie, which, I mean, I didn't use Axie, but I feel like Axie was a really great example of rapid, almost flash scaling. And I think that the way that it's going to happen is through gaming.
Can you elaborate a little bit on this? Like, why gaming? This is pretty interesting.
Because gaming is fun, number one. And what do people like to do?
Social media is not?
I find social media lately to be so taxing as to be not something I don't even do anymore. But the thing about gaming is it's fun and it's play, right? And when you think about what humans really want, most of what we want theoretically is play. And I think work at large is actually becoming gamified as well. And the smartest people I know are all looking at how to gamify their product or their platform in some way or another. And so gamification can mean incentives, it can mean graphics, it can mean whatever. But I think that it has to be fun and entertaining for someone to actually, if it feels like work, so let's be honest, if you want to go download a Phantom wallet or even a MetaMask wallet, or you want to deal with your MetaMask, it's work. Nobody has time for work.
Do you think it will work with women? Make them play?
It should be intentional.
I remember you mentioned, and it's stuck a little bit with me, like make it simple. I don't think that it's actually about simpleness. It's about something else, right? About engagement.
It's about engagement. It should be really intentional engagement. And you mentioned diversity of the teams. That's right. Just policies and regulations would not work. There should be also incentives to companies, especially private sector. Why would they do it? Why would, if they create a product, a service which is relatable and usable and relevant to all and not just half of the population, and I'm just simplifying it, then the revenue also will grow, and we have examples. We need to build those economic cases. We need to look into data, and we need to normalize this conversation. If I give you an example, 50 years ago, this panel could be just all men, and many would say it's okay. Not like many wouldn't even question it. Nowadays, anyone would question, majority of would question. We're still not there, but people would say it's not okay if the whole company is just men or all speakers are men. We make intentional efforts to make sure we diversify our representation in all spheres and areas. We normalize this conversation. So we should normalize the conversation that the creation phase, the design phase, also should be equitable. And since we work with many companies, and now we have like Adobe as part of our alliance, Salesforce, HP, but some of the big companies, they're still not ready. And they don't even know, when I speak with their teams, they don't even know where to send me. Is it the product developers? Is it our engineers? Is it our legislation policy people? Who to talk to? At best, they send me to the diversity and inclusion team. And I'm like, I'm speaking about half of the population. It's not a small niche of special needs. Why are you sending me to diversity and inclusion team? Oh, this is the team which deals with gender. I'm like, okay. So we didn't normalize
This
it
is
yet.
the country of normalization. And actually, well, I think data is something that can be objective enough to actually make it not as we are yelling about this. Because whenever we highlight something, like let's highlight that we are here gender balanced, like, but why should we highlight it? It should be normal, right? And this is the intrinsic data driven data design, right?
And just to add also, data, yes, but again, sometimes some of the technology like AI and the large language models and some others, they really rely on historical data. And historical data is biased. It's not much we can do with that. But we can weight data. We can add more weight to gendered data. There are ways to increase the visibility of the female-based data. There are ways, but it's a lot of efforts, investment, and intentional. Again, the will should be there.
Scott, you have this legal background that I would love to use a little bit. So from the regulatory perspective, how do you think this should and could be standardized?
I was about to be controversial, but you sent me back to regulation, so I'll hold it. I'm not going to give up on the thought I had. One of the problems in our space with regulation of virtual assets is the almost universal, just not fit for purpose nature of regulations. TradFi regulations, for example, treat things in a very siloed way. We have commodities, securities, utilities, governance, payments. They're very well-known buckets, and often many countries will have different regulators and different sets of rules that govern these things. The problem with what we're doing and what our clients are doing, which is trying to build the future of finance, and to the example I gave, further inclusion and really just models that we've not seen before, is these things don't sit in those buckets. They have different features of different traditional aspects. And even in the context of some of the real estate deals we're working on, where it looks like a security in some respects because it's a financial investment in a fractional piece of real estate. But in other respects, it's got things like utility functionality. If it's a fractional interest in a hotel, it now includes a weekend stay free and maybe a discount at the bar. And so you start getting these hybrids because the technology is allowing people to be much more creative and to merge things in a way that traditionally finance hasn't done. So I was part of the team that wrote the regulatory framework in Dubai. It's one of the reasons I relocated there last year. And they've done away with it. So they have just said, if it's a bundle of rights sitting in a token on a distributed ledger platform, then it is a virtual asset. So it's the only place in the world where things like NFTs are now comprehensively regulated. But NFTs are regulated the same as a security token. Everything is caught. There's one regulator and one set of rules. Now, for those in the US, wouldn't you like that, as regulators fight over who's going to hit you over the head in the dark because you got it wrong for rules they didn't bother telling you about? And so to me, there's a real problem with adoption of this potential because of that regulatory framework. Can I throw in a bit of controversial?
Oh, yes, please.
Great. I was on a panel last night with, and I won't name names, it was Chatham House Rules. I'm going to say be careful what you ask for in prefacing this. And it was somebody with very experience in the retail sector. And there was this staggering statistic that was shared with me. And I had an all-female panel last night. I was moderating. I was definitely ganged up on. The statistic was that over the holiday period, there was $700 billion worth of retail sales. During that same period, there was $1 trillion worth of retail returns. These are products that get bought and more got returned than was bought over the holiday period. And I'm not really a shopper, you can probably tell. But I'm like, what's going on here? And they said, we don't really know. How can blockchain help? And I immediately launched into, well, digital identity. Let's find out who the bad people are, who are the repeat offenders. And the answer was, well, we know who the repeat offenders are. It's women. They buy 3 dresses. They're only ever going to keep 1, so 2 go back. And so it's really interesting, actually, that as we open up and talk about data, we need to be open and honest about it's going to reveal some things in a transparent way, which I think is good, but we need to own that truth as well.
You want to add on this?
I'm just so surprised by those numbers because
But honestly,
it's not sustainable. You know, from a retail standpoint, that is not sustainable. And then not to mention the carbon footprint of sending everything back, but that's another story.
But this is a pretty known, fact that women are spending more money in general, and but the design of the products are not always directed to women because they are designed by men, right? And this is something that in blockchain is even more complicated, in my opinion, because all the statistics about blockchain users and cryptocurrency users actually are complicated with the fact that there are anonymous users, and I'm pretty sure that there are more women there. I can share a story that shocked me a lot 6 years ago when I was working with one of my writer, whose name was Christian. And after 6 months of being one of the most prolific and read author at Cointelegraph, I received a message from her. She told me, my name actually is Julia. Can I use it? And I'm like, sure. Why didn't you use it before? And she was like, well, I actually was afraid that I wouldn't taken seriously as a woman. And so I think it's like a doubled bias. And it also has impact on data because, well, online, her articles are under a male byline. So it's already there in the data. And my question to you is, from the data perspective, what we as a community can do actually to shape these data-driven solutions in the most inclusive way, and what are the risks on the way to 100% inclusion is just impossible, but at least to make sure that we are perfectionist and every day we do it better and better.
So, Davos is really important because it sort of sets the agenda for the year. And I've been noodling something the last couple of days. And so, Sandra, I'm going to give you this, and I hope it's going to be big. Somebody said to me in one of the things, we need new words, right? So the world is changing so fast. And there's so many things coming at us, we actually need new words for things. And so that got me then thinking. I was like, oh, okay. And then I was at another conversation, and we were talking about Web 1, 2, and 3. And, this conversation really from a data perspective, and because we're at GBBC, we're really talking about Web 3. So this person said, well, Web 1 was read, Web 2 was write, and Web 3 is own. And I kind of got then to another conversation, and people were talking about how we're all digital serfs in Web 2. We're really toiling away for Google and Amazon and everybody else. That's why I'm so off social media right now, even though I post every day. It feels like work, and I feel like I'm just making Google money every time I post something.
Search for something, right?
Yeah, and so why are we making them all the money? And so I'm like, okay, so Web 1, we were surfing the internet, SURF, right? Web 2, we've been surfing the internet, SERF. And so I was talking to our editor, our innovation editor, Manveen, and I'm like, okay, so we need a surf for Web 3. And so we're like, it's got to be SIRF. And so we came down to the fact that Web 3 has got about me, my sovereignty, my independence, my ownership, my responsibility. And so surfing the internet for Web 3, let's hope it can be sovereign, independent, responsible, and friendly. Okay? So we're moving from surfing to surfing to surfing. And then we're going to add a song and a reel and put it back on Instagram. But nonetheless, I think that from a data perspective, that for me is where I'm going after this Davos, is whatever we're doing with Hub is helping people surf, to be sovereign, independent, responsible, and friendly. And that should be our mantra. And if we can get to that, then I think we're really getting it right with data. Because what that means is that people own their own data, they have control over their data, they are responsible for their data. So, you might have to do a little bit of work. But it hopefully creates a friendlier, better, more prosperous world. And I think that's what we can all agree on.
Again, and what's your, sorry, if you want.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that. I mean, as a recovered data lawyer, one of the issues I see with privacy regulation and Europe perhaps most problematically with GDPR is that they're written from the perspective of the data gatherers, the very people you're talking about that we're working for. To me, the digital identity where I get to own my data and I get to turn on and off who can do what with it, because I've just arrived in Switzerland and suddenly I'm being bombarded with ads in a language I can't understand about chocolate and things that they sell here. I like chocolate, but I can't understand the language, so I haven't bought any yet. But if I could turn on and I could control, it's my information. I would like to hear about chocolate. I'd like to set some settings. But if you look at the way the laws are set up, they're all about, and I think Europe went away from consent and introduced this concept of legitimate interest, which is companies deciding what they think is reasonable for them to be doing with your data. And I think it's got the balance wrong, because it is the individual's asset, not the company's.
This could be another big discussion, and
That's the problem. Right now, it's the company's asset, and that is the crux of the problem. We don't own our data. We don't get to choose, and we send and let every company build their own data set on us instead of us controlling our core data.
But in some areas, we made progress. Let's say not all data, but if I post a clip from the movie, but I don't quote music and I don't quote the authorship, there is a copyright, and YouTube, Instagram will take it down immediately within the seconds. But if somebody is using my picture, distorted, deep fake it, whatever, or my ex-partner decide to revenge of something and using something that I really don't want to be online, I have no means to do anything about it. There is no body right over my image, as we call it. Where to go, where to complain, and again, it's you who is a victim, and it's not on the perpetrator. The perpetrator is still there, and there is no means to. Meta introduced hushing the images, but it's again, you should send them the picture and say, hush it, please. You should do something. And the perpetrator who did it, nothing. And this is also, I agree with what you said, how the search should be, but and also coming still back to simplicity. The technology is growing, and if now we have people in the room who, I assume, all tech savvy, understand a lot about blockchain and frontier technology, but not everybody like that. An average user wouldn't know all the mechanisms, how it works. And if I bring the example from the medicine, if we give a vaccination to a child, we don't explain mother of all of the immunity mechanisms of how vaccine, mRNA, T-cell immunity works, response. We explain them, okay, safety, how it works, what to expect, and why would you need it. So I think the same, we need to invent the simpler language for the common user on how to have their rights and exercise their rights, what to do to make sure, like a user rights, right? So consumer rights. But again, if I don't understand how it works and it's all made so complicated, like a black box, and everybody's making it so mysterious, oh, we don't really know how AI works. So, and then it's frightening. And then you're like, I don't want to be maybe even part of it. Let me stay away. But I'm sure as creators and developers and lawyers and legislators, we can find the language how to make sure that a common, normal, ordinary user knows how to exercise their rights and the threats, but also opportunities.
And can I just add on that? I think it's not even so much that it's frightening for people. People are just too busy. Nobody has any time to think about anything other than what's right in front of them right now. And so when you're trying to get somebody to understand a deep concept like this, people are just like, whatever, I'll get to it later. Like, I'll figure out my blockchain wallet later. I'll worry about my data later, everything later, because I gotta make dinner for the kids. And so that is, I think, the fundamental thing.
Oh, unless you start using it and realize something is not working for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned gaming, and just one example, when the metaverse was just created, there was this future that when the hands in the metaverse approach your head, it will disappear. So kind of not harming, because they probably took it from boxing. This is what you should protect when you fight. But then the female user realized then that when the hand reach anywhere else, that's okay. The hand doesn't disappear. And they start to complain because in the first days of introduction, there was already sexual harassment in metaverse. And then they said, okay, can we make sure that the hand just disappear when it's placed anywhere near my body, not only head? So again, unless you start using it, you don't even realize because you were not asked when it was designed.
Okay, before it gets too complicated, let's get back to like the word simplicity. So I think like for me at least, simplicity is when you actually you do not even think and you do not even want to understand because it's already designed into the product. And I think this is what needs to be done with all the integral and inclusive standards that to the.
Just add one thing to that, because like
Sure.
conversation this morning, we're on the edge of the disappearance of the web. That was another big insight I've seen. The web is actually about to disappear.
You just throw here like a very small. Okay.
Where's it going?
Yeah, because it's going to become everywhere. It's going to be on the walls. It's going to be in our headphones. Like the idea of websites and a lot of the things that we've thought of as the web is about to go fully physical around us because of LED, other integrated technology. The web is going to be the walls. The web is going to be the road. The web is going to be everything.
Well, the roads are gonna be web, and the us are gonna be web. Okay, this is a lot of food for thoughts. I would love to give a few minutes for questions because Shiraz, you need a mic, I guess, because we have a online audience.
Fantastic. Christina, thank you so much for this great panel. Thank you to all the panelists. Shiraz Ahmed, Managing Partner of Storm Partners here. We're talking about integrity and inclusion. And something that Nijina said about gendering data, right? And I feel like one of the worst things that we could do is to label data, right? Because if there was racial data, I would be like, okay, but this is brown, black, like what is this coming from? So I just want to deep dive further on that topic. And I think one of the beauties of data that I know today is that maybe it's not neutral, but it's kind of just there, right? Do we have to put too many identifying labels on data?
I want to share something that's not really an answer to your question, but I think it poses a challenge to all of us. We've recently moved to Dubai. I've got two young children, 4 and 6. And my daughter, 6, came home from school recently, and she said she made a new friend and gave me the name of her friend. And I said, I didn't recognise the name. I didn't know where I was coming from. I said, where's he from? And she said, well, he's from my school. And I said, yeah, but where's he from? Like, where's he come from? And she said, well, he lives in Dubai. And it became apparent to me she doesn't see race at all. And to me, it was like, these are actually learned things. And I think to your point, if we start labelling, we are at risk of actually enshrining, whether it's race or gender or whatever else, these biases. Whereas, I found this topic in preparation a little bit challenging because I haven't really thought that hard about some of these issues. We're just trying to democratise finance for everyone without necessarily specifically thinking about it.
But I really like this this comment, and I think we didn't, like at least I didn't understand this as labeling. It's rather about access to data. And then maybe now what you said about me as a center actually makes more sense, because in the end it's like one individual item of information or one individual user. And yeah, we can have hundreds of labels, every one of us. And in 10 years, maybe it will appear as biased. And then in 20 years, there will be other labels. So yeah, no labels.
I disagree, sorry, respectfully. Because of course, some labeling can be used to exclude. And social justice, and we all know where it's happening and how. But if you do not disaggregate, and you can't disaggregate it without labeling, if you don't know, and you're asking too much, too many, well, there are 4 billion of women and 4 billion of men, and when I'm not even talking about like all the other diversities, which are of course many. So if we do not have even that simple disaggregation, then you will not have your needs addressed, and I will not have my needs addressed, because it all will be one bucket of like average needs. But let's say using AI, identifying like skin lesions. We now have Google, we now have some others, like Amazon coming can help a lot. The skin lesion is so different. And first of all, every cell is gendered. Second of all, we're talking about skin color. I was trained in a country where we didn't have people of color. So when I moved to work as a doctor in Africa, I had a lot of discoveries that my textbook didn't teach me, because the black skin and everything on black skin and newborns from African mothers look different, and you do not recognize a lot of the conditions and diseases. So we need that. We need to have those objects. Of course, then, how we use it, how we use those labels, how we use those disaggregation, that's another thing. And in one of other panel, I was talking about in the recruitment algorithm, AI has this mom's penalty. Because if mother has a break in work because of the childbirth, she would be put at the bottom of the recruitment list because she had a gap in her career. So do we label her as a mother so she's not excluded and not penalized for being a mother? Or do we actually use this data for the good, for the social good?
I think you mentioned a very important thing. It's actually about us. It's not about continents, races, or genders. I think it's about the fact that we here in Davos have culturally this Western world bias. And I think this is what we can get over if we take every opportunity with the help of data, solutions, etc., to look at the world through the eyes of others. I think we do not have time anymore.
I add one sentence to that, though. In our world, in Hub, we're training our AI with lots of data, and we call them specs. And a spec can be thousands of different things, and specs, there are hundreds of different specs that make up a digital identity. I see the things that you just looked at that people do use to discriminate on as specs, but there are thousands, even millions of specs. In the long run, I don't think it matters. It's how humans interpret it.
And also spec is a very good meat.
Yes, it is.
All right, Christina.
Diversity and inclusion. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
and
much.
happy to continue
so much,
these conversations in Davos. Thank you so much.